Hey everybody, Jordan here from the Minnesota Discovery Center. Welcome back to the 10th annual, second virtual Iron Range Science and Engineering Festival. This year we're proud to be presenting to more than 1,350 Northland students from more than 13 schools across northern Minnesota. But before we get started with these exciting presentations, we'd like to thank these sponsors. This virtual experience is a partnership presentation brought to you by the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Let's watch and learn more about the health of our ecosystems and waterways right here in North America.
Hi, my name is Taiji Nelson and I'm an educator at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're here today at the field station of the museum about 50 miles east of the city named Powdermill Nature Reserve. Today we're going to introduce you to one of our scientists, Andrea Kautz, and show you a little bit more about how you can do some of the science that we conduct here at the museum in your own backyard. So Andrea is an entomologist, meaning she studies insects and other invertebrates, and particularly ones that live in streams. In Powdermill, we're really lucky to have some very healthy streams that, through Andrea's research, can tell us about what is happening in the land around us. Studying streams is important because it tells us about the health of water, land, and people. So we're excited for you to meet some of our scientists and again learn how the science that's happening here is also the science that's happening in your backyard.
Hi, my name's Andrea. I'm an entomologist here at Powdermill Nature Reserve. I've been working here for about 5 years. When I was hired, I was doing the imaging of the aquatic macroinvertebrates that were used in the website called macroinvertebrates.org. Today we're out at the stream. This is Powdermill Run that runs through the reserve. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we sample stream insects. And the reason why we want to do this is because they can tell us about the quality of the water in the stream. So some insects are very sensitive to disturbance in the stream, things such as pollution, acidification, lower oxygen levels, warmer temperatures, sediment. And so by sampling the macroinvertebrates that are present in the stream, we can get an idea of how healthy the water is. So let's go out into the stream. We're going to take a sample of macroinvertebrates using this D-frame kick net that we're going to put down into the water. We're going to target an area where the water is moving fast over the rocks. You can see the water's white with bubbles. That means there's a lot of oxygen in the water there, and that's where the insects like to be because there's lots of oxygen for them to breathe. So I'm just going to head out in here to the center of the stream. I'm going to stick my net down facing upstream so that the water is flowing through the net. Then I'm going to disturb the substrate, that's the rocks that are in the stream, right above the net. And this is going to dislodge the insects from their crevices and little cracks that they're hanging out in. And when they become dislodged, they're going to flow right into the net. So once I think I've disturbed the area in front of the net really well, I can lift up my net. I'll take it over here to the bank. And I'll empty it into this white tub. That'll make the insects really easy to see. So now I'm just pulling out some of these macroinvertebrates into these smaller trays here so you can get a better look at them. We have a nice diversity of different insects here. We have some cranefly larvae that are detritivores. They eat organic material and recycle it back into the environment. We have some mayflies of a couple different families. Mayflies play a diversity of roles in the environment. Some of them are shredders. They eat the algae on rocks. Others are predators, others are detritivores. We also have a fish fly larva, this large thing here with all these appendages along its abdomen and these powerful mandibles. They are predators of other macroinvertebrates, so I actually have to be careful. If I leave them in this tray too long with these other invertebrates, he might have a snack. We also have these two-tailed immature insects called stoneflies. They are particularly sensitive to pollution, and we have a couple of those in here as well. Mayflies, you may find streams with stoneflies and a lot of these other sensitive taxa, but no mayflies, and that could be because your stream is very acidic, and they really are insensitive They really are intolerant to any type of acidification of the stream. So this one here is a caddisfly, and it's one that makes a case. So several of our caddisflies make protective cases around their bodies, which are very soft, like caterpillars. So they use different materials like small rocks, leaves, sticks, all kinds of different materials that are in the stream to build these protective cases that keep them safe. This one in particular uses very, very small stones and even grains of sand and glues them together with silk to make this protective case. So as you can see, we're getting a lot of different insects here, different diversity of feeding habits and places where they hang out in the stream. And that's one of the great things about studying entomology in general, is there's just so much to learn. There's so many different groups. There's over 1 million described species of insects, and you can really never know everything there is to know about insects. There's always something to learn, and that's something I really, really enjoy about entomology. And that's definitely applicable to even just the stream insects. As you can see, just a couple minutes out kicking in the stream, and we've got all these different insects to look at and admire in our pans.
Awesome. So you all saw how Andrea, the professional, does her job, and I'm going to show you how you can recreate that science with stuff you probably have laying around your house. So it's a few simple tools that you can use to explore streams and find the awesome living things that live near you. The first is a kitchen strainer. This is just a normal, cheap version you can buy at the dollar store. Make sure you don't use one that you use at home for cooking. Second tool you're going to use is a paintbrush, and this is what we'll use to safely get any of the organisms out of our net and into a jar. Whenever we're exploring, we want to make sure we're taking care of the organisms we find and that we return them back to the stream in the same health that we got them. The next tool we'll use is a glass jar. This is just a pickle jar that I made sure to wash out really well with soap and water, and then rinse it to make sure there's no more vinegar, no more soap, anything that might harm these organisms. As Andrea said, we know the organisms are sensitive to pollutants, and so we want to make sure that we are keeping them safe. But this is just a normal glass jar that makes them a little less scary to observe. I like these bugs because they're kind of creepy, they're kind of gross. I'm into that because I'm a geek. But if you're a person that isn't into bugs, this makes it much easier to observe them up close, so you can really observe their behavior. I think a lot of times people are concerned. They think you need to identify things first. But really, these organisms are fascinating. Just by watching them before you ever try to figure out what it is, you can observe interesting things about their bodies, their behaviors, understand a little bit more about what their lives are like. And then the last two tools you'll use, hand sanitizer. You want to make sure that anytime you explore the stream, afterwards you'll use hand sanitizer. There might be bacteria or other things living in the water. Perfectly safe to explore, but at the end of the time you want to make sure you use hand sanitizer. And then also, I have knee-high boots that I bought yesterday, pretty cheap. But you don't need knee-high boots, you don't need waders. You can use a sturdy pair of water shoes or even an old pair of sneakers that you don't mind getting wet. But again, I wouldn't recommend going in barefoot just because it could be slippery, and you want to keep yourself safe as well as the organisms. The last thing is something that people think you need to explore a stream. This is a field guide that helps us identify the organism in the stream. Pro tip, you don't need a field guide to explore. You can leave this at home, but if you are interested, if you want to become a scientist, if you want to learn a little bit more about what these different organisms are, you can definitely bring a field guide with you streamside to help you identify things. Again, identification is not the most important thing. You want to be able to just look at nature. One of my favorite things about coming out here, it's a beautiful day. I just love seeing what's out here. Identification is interesting. It's important to know how to do if you want to become a scientist or if you want to learn more about a specific species. But again, you should be out here having fun as well as learning. First thing I'm going to do is fill up my jar with a little bit of stream water. This makes sure that whenever I catch an organism, I have somewhere safe to put it. Make sure you're not putting an organism into a dry jar. A lot of these things need water to be able to breathe. They have gills or they breathe through their skin, so you want to make sure you don't let them dry out. So I'm going to start by filling my pickle jar up with a little bit of stream water. If you can, try to not get any dirt, just because it makes the organisms harder to see. They're used to living with a little bit of dirt, a little bit of sediment, so they'll be okay. But if you want to observe the organisms, try and get as clear of water as you can. Next step, very similar to what Andrea was doing. You're gonna take your kitchen strainer and then direct it so the water's flowing through it this way. When I'm in a stream, I like to find an area where the water's being funneled between rocks. So right here in a riffle, lots of oxygen like Andrea mentioned. So I'll just start by sinking my kitchen strainer into the water. There's a good chance you might get a little wet. Prepare yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. It does happen, but again, that's what happens when you're in the stream. So I'll sink my kitchen strainer in, so again, the water's flowing through it, and I'll just start turning over rocks with my hands. So you kind of can use your hands, move that dirt and sediment, shake the rocks around a little bit, and any of these bugs that are clinging to the bottom or are hiding in the dirt, they'll flow right into your net. And so I'll just lift it up. You can see there'll be like some sticks, some leaves, but you want to watch for movement. And I can already see a ton of living things in my kitchen strainer. So sometimes it can be a little hard to tell what's alive and what's not in your strainer. Macroinvertebrates, they range in size and shape. They can be as small as an eyelash or as large as your thumb. What you can do to see what's alive is a lot of times when it dries out, things will stop moving around. They'll try and conserve energy. So you can just dunk it in, dip the tip of your paintbrush, and then you'll use that to slowly scoop or scrape organisms out. So I see a couple different living things here that I'll try and grab with my paintbrush. And we use a paintbrush rather than our finger, not because I'm afraid anything in here will hurt me. I'm more afraid that I'll hurt it. Sometimes the organism's legs can get stuck in the mesh of the strainer, or I'll accidentally smoosh it, so the paintbrush is just a way to kind of gently coax things out. So some things you want to observe after you catch a few different of these organisms. You might look at their size and shape. You might look at their body parts, how many legs they have, how many tails they have, if they have antennae. You might also watch for their behavior. What do they do when do they react to shadows? Do they react to other organisms in the jar? There's a lot you can observe about organisms just by watching closely. Natural history, it's different from other sciences because it focuses on observation more than experimentation. A lot of other sciences, you would come out here and you would change something. You might change how much water is flowing through. You might change the temperature. Natural history is different. Really, it focuses on just observing what's happening. So a lot of people who are interested in natural history are people who just like spending time outside, like watching, like listening, are really just interested in not only individual organisms, but the relationships between them. Each of the organisms in the stream plays a role. Some are important food sources for other organisms. Some help decompose leaves. Some are, really important for things like fishermen who want to kind of understand how trout identify the organisms they want to eat, and they can craft these lures that look almost exactly like these organisms. So it's not just a thing about the health of plants and the health of animals. It's also the way that people relate to waterways. In the Laurel Highlands, we are blessed to have cold water streams. It's one of the things that makes this a special place, and one of the reasons why this field station exists. This is a unique environment. You can't find it anywhere else. And because of that, people come here from all over. We have people from all over the country coming here to fish, coming here to mountain bike, coming here to recreate. And so it's worth protecting. It's worth protecting these organisms because they tell us about how we are impacting the land. Things like climate change. We know in Pennsylvania, it's getting hotter. Streams are drying up in the summer, and in the fall we have these big rains that cause flood. These are all things that impact the life in streams. We know that organisms, these organisms live in the stream, sometimes for a few months, sometimes a few years. A big flood comes, washes them out, they can't live here. If a stream dries up in the summer, they have nowhere else to go. So climate change and other sources of pollution are major impacts on insects, other wildlife, but ultimately humans. We're out here to understand insects, but we're also out here to understand ourselves. We got one of the green net spinners. I mean, you can see the gills on the back of this mayfly. It's like this cloudy, feathery thing coming off its abdomen. Cold water holds a ton of oxygen, and as streams warm up, it gets harder for these organisms to breathe, particularly when they have gills like this. One of the important ways we can help protect these organisms is to help keep streams cool. There are lots of organizations whose mission is to protect forests around streams. That's one of the best ways to keep streams cool, particularly as climate change is heating our planet. Once you're done observing the organisms you've caught, you want to make sure we're releasing them back in the stream. You don't want to keep an organism for too long. This is definitely something you don't want to take it home, because again, as the water in this jar heats up, it's going to get harder to breathe. So take them out, maybe a few minutes, make some observations, and then return them back where you found them. It's important to do this in a way that doesn't hurt the organism, so you're not just going to unscrew it, whip it into the water, and say bye. What you're going to do is you're going to unscrew it carefully, find another one of these riffles where there's lots of oxygen, and you're just going to gently pour it back in. Double check the jar to make sure nothing is left behind. Ditto for your net. A lot of times organisms will still be clinging to the side of the thing. You'll get in your car, drive home, and you'll find out you brought a mayfly home with you. So make sure, again, you're not taking anything home with you. Another important thing, if you turned over any big rocks, a lot of these organisms, they'll be clinging to the bottom of big rocks. If you flipped anything over, make sure you turn it back where you found it. This is like the roof of their homes, and we want to make sure we're not hurting the organisms we're hoping to understand.
So another thing that you want to keep in mind when you're sampling a stream is to get all the different habitats that stream represents. So not only do you want the center of the stream where the water's running really fast and making a riffle, you also want to sample the edges, because that's a different habitat within the stream where different organisms live. So some organisms prefer the edges where the water's slower. Some organisms prefer a sandy substrate versus a rocky substrate. And some animals prefer to live within the leaf pack or the leaf litter that's at the bottom of streams. So there's really a variety of places you can sample within a stream to get a diversity of insects. I found this crayfish by sampling the edge of the stream where this guy likes to hang out. This is just a little one. They can get quite a bit bigger than this. So crayfish are crustaceans. They are arthropods, but they are not insects. So when we use the term aquatic macroinvertebrate, we're really referring to all the animals that live in the stream that don't have a backbone, but that are big enough to see with the naked eye. So this includes mainly insects. They're the largest and most diverse group, but also other arthropods like this crayfish and other things that aren't arthropods. So things like annelids, they're similar to earthworms that are aquatic, and also things like snails, which are mollusks and belong to a different phylum than arthropods. So based on what we've collected so far today, we've seen a lot of organisms belonging to sensitive groups. So we're seeing a good diversity of mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies. And those are typically thought of as the three main sensitive groups. So because we're seeing a lot of those and not really a lot of taxa that indicate poor water quality, we can really say that Powdermill Run is healthy. So as you can see, a lot of the diversity of insects we collected today from the stream were sensitive to things like pollution and high water temperatures. Insects such as mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies, which are known to be particularly sensitive groups. Powdermill Run is an exceptional value stream, which is the highest rating that it can get in the state of Pennsylvania, meaning that it is critical cold water habitat and important to conserve.